If you are making a negative sentence, it's the same structure, but you need to use do not and does not, right? Do not, does not. And don't change the verb, right? Because it's very common that when we are using the auxiliary, sometimes we repeat the rule, and you don't need to repeat the rule, only use it here. Only here, right? I don't practice my English every day. She doesn't practice. No, she doesn't practices, right? I don't speak Spanish on class. She doesn't speak. No, she doesn't speaks, right? It's very normal to do that. It's very normal to make that mistake at the beginning, but with the practice, you get it, right? So just remember, doesn't and don't, right? For example, I don't practice every day, you don't practice every day, he doesn't practice, right? We don't practice, they don't practice, okay? If you want to ask a question, it's the same. You need to use do and does. So, for example, do you practice every day? Yes, I do, or no, I don't. Does she practice every day? No, she doesn't. Yes, she does. So this is for negative, right? With the contraction, of course. Remember, do not or don't. Does not, doesn't. Formal and informal, that thing doesn't exist. Contractions are to speak fluent, remember. So when you're speaking, you need to use contractions, right? It's very common to use the contractions. Is to put the words together. I do not practice English, or I don't practice English, right? I don't practice, together, right? When you're using contractions, it's together. I don't practice. I don't practice every day. I don't study every day. She doesn't speak, right? Questions is this, with the auxiliary, the same. You can ask a yes or no question, or you can ask a specific question. When you are asking a specific question, you need to use a question word, right? And the question words are how?
Many? No.
Yeah, well, how many, how much?
Where?
Where? When?
Who?
What?
What? Where? When? Why?
Exactly. What, where, when, why, how, right? Remember, pronunciation is okay if you say what or what, when or when. It depends on the accent, okay? So, the only difference... Good morning. The only difference is when you're using who, for example. Look, what do you practice? Or when do you practice? Why do you practice English? Who? With who, we don't use the auxiliary, right? So when we're using the question word who, you can ask, for example, who practices English with you? Yeah. Yeah, because you're not using do. Okay? So you need to say who practices, because you're asking for the subject, right? Who practices with you? It is not very common, but yes, you can ask that thing. Remember, the simple present is for hobbies, routines, habits, for something permanent, right? You use the simple present for permanent things. The other one, with the verb to be, is the present continuous, right? Like, for example, I practice my English every day, or I am practicing English every day. What is the difference? The verb to be and the ing. But the difference in the context is, I am practicing English every day, is that it's temporary, right? That's temporary. Maybe it's going to end eventually. I practice English every day is permanent, right? It's my routine, it's something that I like to do, so as long as I can, I do that, right? So that's the difference, right? Okay, no questions. So remember, this is just a review. I know you know this. Now let's practice. Is that what?
It's supposed.
Yeah, it is supposed. So now, negative and affirmative is the same structure, but the difference is the auxiliary, right? You need to use do and doesn't, okay? Just don't forget that. For questions, the same. So now, what are some of the daily activities that you do at home? Can you explain me your routines? When we are talking about routines and habits, it is very common to use frequency expressions, right? Frequency adverbs, for example. I wash the dishes. When? Well, twice a week, right? Not every day. I wash the dishes twice a week. Only twice a week. So, do you remember the frequency adverbs? What are the frequency adverbs?
All the time, sometimes,
Sometimes,
Always.
always,
never,
never, usually.
hardly ever.
No, usually. Usually is in Spanish, right? Usually.
Hardly
Yeah,
ever.
usually. I am trolling you, right? Now remember, it's just to have fun, right? Remember that to learn English, what is the secret?
Practice, practice.
Yeah, practice, 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 practice. Practice, basically, right?
Think English.
Yeah. Practice English, think in English, sleep English, eat English, right? But that's the secret. But the tips, what are the tips to learn English?
Make English fun.
Number one, yeah. But the number one is get ready, right? Get ready. Now, not only for English, for whatever you're doing, right? You need to be ready. For example, right now, if you're like, oh, I am asleep, I want to go home, I want to be on the bed, you're not ready. So go home, sleep, right? No, sleep. And come back the next week.
You can do that 2 times.
Huh? Yes, but you can do that 2 times only. So it's better for you to sleep good. You need to be ready, right? I learned that in a difficult way. See, when you are... I'm getting sentimental now. No, never mind. So look, I am looking for something. I'm looking for the adverbs, the frequency adverbs. Look, well, I'm going to show you first the frequency expressions. There are the frequency expressions, right? We have frequency adverbs. You mentioned me the frequency adverbs. Like, remember that the frequency adverbs are like it's like a graphic. You are talking about the percentage of frequency, right? For example, 100%, always. 50%, sometimes. 0%, never, right? 10%? No, 10. 10%?
Usually,
Hardly ever.
Hardly ever, right? Maybe, hardly ever. Rarely,
rare.
rarely. Hardly ever, rarely. What about the 25%?
Sometimes.
Often?
25. Sorry.
Yeah. So basically, usually, 90% of the time, right? 90% of the time, usually. And 100%? Always, right? I have a mess on my computer. Is here. Oh my god. Just 10 seconds. Can't believe it. Yeah, here. Okay, so look, I am going to show you the difference. There is a difference between frequency expressions and frequency adverbs, right? So what's the difference? Remember, these are frequency expressions. For example, once. You can say once a day, once a week, once in a while, once in a blue moon, right? Now, and we have frequency adverbs. For example, you can say, too small, right? Is it okay?
Yes.
Look, in these examples, what is missing?
The verb.
The verb, right? Only the verb. So, and in these sentences, we are using the simple present structure, and we are using frequency expressions and frequency adverbs, right? So, one more time, tell me, what are the frequency adverbs? Always, usually, sometimes, never, sometimes again, no, sorry, hardly ever, right? Often, and etc., right? Now, we have frequency adverbs. Frequency adverbs, right? Always, usually, sometimes, never. And we have frequency expressions. For example, twice a week, or
At the week.
3 times a day, at the weekend, every couple of days. What's the difference? Actually, it's very visual. What is the difference? Huh? Yes. For example, look, the frequency expressions are at the end, right? And the frequency adverbs, like after the subject, right?
Okay.
After the subject, right? So it's between the subject and the verb, right? So that's the way it is. When you're using frequency adverbs, remember it's subject, the frequency adverb, and then the verb. Good night. Hello. Come in, please. And
When we make a question.
do you usually, it's the same.
Okay.
Do you usually drink coffee? Right? Yes, it's the same. So if you are making a question, asking a question, you need to follow the same rule.
Okay. Subject.
Adverb, verb, and the rest of the sentence, right? The complement. For example, do you always get up late at the weekend? I get up late at the weekend. Do you get up late at the weekend? I always get up late at the weekend. Always. Always. It's a fact. For example, if I have a plan on the weekend, it has to be after 12 o'clock, right?
12?
Yeah, because I wake up late. Yeah, always. Always. Unless there is something very urgent or important, I don't wake up late, right? So, well, in this case, the only difference will be when you're using the auxiliary for negative, right? Because you need to say, I don't always wake up late, right? When you're using the auxiliary, right? It's I don't, and then the adverb, and then the verb. Right? I don't always wake up late. But for the frequency expressions, right, like twice a week or twice a year, every morning, you can use them at the end or in the beginning, right? So it's no difference. Here, no. You don't say, for example, I always get up late at the weekend. You cannot say, I get up always late at the weekend. That's incorrect, right? You cannot say that. It has to be like this. I always get up. So you need to follow that structure, right?
Okay.
Can you complete these sentences? Just give me one example, for example. And remember, it's very visual. What's the difference between adverbs and frequency expressions? The position, right? So at the end, and the others are after the subject. Right? After the subject. In the middle of the subject and the verb. Okay? Yes?
Subject and yes.
Subject, adverb, verb. Right? Okay. Give me one example. I already did one. I always get up late at weekend. Something that you always do at the weekend? We are talking about routines, remember? Habits and routines. So we need to use the simple present structure. I always watch football games at the weekend. I always eat menudo and barbacoa.
Me too.
Yes, you too. Something that you do at the weekend?
Drink beer.
You always drink beer at the weekend, okay? Huh?
With the barbacha.
With the barbacoa. Go to church, maybe?
I always go to church.
Okay. Every couple of days, one day yes, one day no. Every couple of days, for example, I wash my clothes every couple of days.
Every couple of days.
I usually sleep in my bedroom. The 90% of the time, right? Sometimes I travel. I sometimes pick my nose when I am alone. I eat cabrito twice a year.
Okay.
I wash the car once a week. I never speak Spanish in class unless it's level 1. In level 1 sometimes I speak Spanish. I sometimes drink cacahuama on Mondays. Yes. But with classy. Not like this, right? in the mug, right?
That's the
Mug.
difference.
Yeah, different. In a mug and with the finger like this, right? Classier. With style. At least twice a day. I brush my teeth. At least twice a day, right? In the morning, never. I never eat in the morning. I always, but sometimes I forgot. I always call my mom, but sometimes I forget. And sometimes when I see a mirror, I smile when I see a mirror. And then I get scared. More than 3 times a day. I drink water more than 3 times a day. Hardly ever, because it's too expensive. I hardly ever.
Take vacation.
Oh no, I hardly ever eat cabrito because it's too expensive. And too often. I don't know. I check the. No, that's not true. I check the mail too often. No, right? That's not true. I don't know. Something that I do too often, like a routine.
I check my
English class
email.
too often?
I check my email.
What?
or I
You
check-
teach English class too often?
Yes, well, yeah. I
never check
teach
my email.
my English class too often.
Or I check my WhatsApp.
Yeah, maybe. I don't. I only check the WhatsApp twice a day. In the morning and at night. In the morning 5 a.m. and at night
1 a.m.
1 a.m. Okay, so
Sorry.
try to complete this.
Why does sometime
This one.
before the subject in this case?
Where?
Sometimes
I
in this
think
case
sometimes I forget.
is
Here.
before the
The subject.
Yeah. For example, here you can say, but I sometimes forget, right?
Oh, I always.
It's because sometimes it is considered as a frequency expression too. So you can use sometimes at the beginning or at the end, but only sometimes, right?
The adverb and frequency expression.
Yes. Sometimes, right? That's the only one. The others, no. For the others, it has to be like always the same, right? Always the same.
And what's the difference between always and usually and always?
The percentage usually is 90% of the time,
100%,
and always is 100%. Usually is 90%, and for example, frequency adverbs are not very specific, but the frequency expressions are a